I do remember uh, in our church, Botanical Avenue, as you were leaving the sanctuary, going through the outer doors, there was a board that posted all of the boys that were in service. In fact, we still have that at church. All the names, and there was probably 20, 25 names of the young men who were in the military. And those who died were there were stars next to their names. We had two that perished during the war, and we still have that at church. Uh, I don't know if our young people even care about that, but as you left the sanctuary, you'd see that board and the names, all the names, and it's a lasting memory. Yeah, a lot of those guys were in 3 or 4 years. In fact, my uncle Frank, who was the second oldest boy in the family, my dad was the oldest. Uncle Frank had served a year in the military and was waiting to be, in those days, it was a year service in the military that was required. So he had completed his 1 year of service and he was standing in line waiting for his discharge. And the officer at the desk would process these guys as they would come up to the desk. And Frank was about to get to the point where he was going to be discharged, and the officer said, "Stop. Pearl Harbor has been bombed, and you are not being released." So my Uncle Frank served 5.5 years in the military. 1 year before the war started, and then for 5 years. He got out when the war was over, so he actually served the longest of all of the San Isidro boys.
Do
A
you
year,
know? Oh, sorry, go on.
a year more than anybody else. He was not a happy camper, to be very blunt about it.
Do you know where he served?
No, it was he did not go overseas. Uh, my uncle Emil Sanazero, he was in the infantry and he was overseas in Germany, I think. I'm not really sure. We also had my uncle Dino, who was he was in first aid, and he was on the front lines to provide first aid to these guys that were wounded. So he saw a lot of action. Uh, but what I found was that those that served in the military that saw combat did not talk about it. They did not talk about their experiences. Uh, what effect did it have on them? Nobody really knew because it wasn't talked about. Now they call it PTSD or whatever. When the person is affected by the war, but they never talked about it. I guess that's about it.
How did your family read? Sorry. How did your family react to Hitler's death?
It's a good question, and I really don't recall Dad and Grandpa speaking about that. In fact, I don't recall radio broadcasts, and we listen to the radio all the time, talking about that. That's a good, interesting question. And why? I don't know. I really don't know why there wasn't more spoken about that. There wasn't much said about the Russian involvement in the war. I don't recall radio broadcasts speaking of that. But my dad would say often that Hitler made a big mistake when he turned his attention from London. He was determined to wipe them out, and he had bombed them for quite some time. But he turned his attention and went east after Russians. He went into Russia, and that's where he made his mistake, because that's where a lot of troops, the German troops, were lost and taken prisoner. But Dad, what I would hear him talking about, that Hitler had made a big mistake, and that he turned, and Dad always looked at it as the providence of the Almighty God that caused his mind to turn his attention from London and England and pursue after the Russians, which was really the beginning of the end for him.